In one of the harshest places on the planet, the Namib Desert, there exists a creature that at first glance you would not believe is a tree. Its short trunk, its leaves twisted like seaweed, looks like no other plant you have ever seen. It is Welwitschia mirabilis, a plant with only 2 leaves but can live for thousands of years. Not 10, not hundreds, but millennia. From the moment it germinates, the Welwitschia produces exactly 2 true leaves. They do not fall. They do not grow. They only grow over time, stretching and being torn apart by the desert sands, giving the impression of dozens of leaf tendrils growing in disorder. But the truth remains, there are only 2 original leaves, and there will never be a third. The Welwitschia belongs to an ancient group of plants called Gnetophyta, and it is the only surviving representative of its genus. The first recorded discovery of this plant was in 1859 when Austrian botanist Friedrich Welwitsch first described this strange desert creature. In his honor, the plant was named Welwitschia, and the Latin word mirabilis means miraculous, a name that is completely deserved. Unlike most plants on the planet that constantly shed their leaves and branches, Welwitschia does not shed its leaves or regenerate its parts, but only lets its 2 long leaves grow forever. Over time, they are torn, twisted, and scratched, but never fall off completely. This is an extremely rare biological mechanism reflecting a special adaptation in the desert environment, where resources are scarce and wasting energy on regeneration is unacceptable in nature. More importantly, Welwitschia is unlike any other plant, and its morphology has baffled even experts. No tall stems, no foliage, just a bulging woody stem close to the ground topped by 2 large tentacle-like leaves and a root system that clings deep into the dry soil. From a distance, many people even mistake it for a dead vine, but in fact, it is one of the symbols of resilience and long-term evolution in nature. With an appearance so strange that it has been called a botanical freak, Welwitschia has raised many questions for scientists since its discovery. Why only 2 leaves? Why does it live so long? And how can it survive in extremely dry conditions that almost no other plant can withstand? The answer begins with its unique form, a system that is extremely energy efficient, a structure that is as durable as steel against wind and sand, and a survival strategy that can only be described as extraordinary. In an age where many tree species are disappearing within decades due to climate change, the fact that a single plant like Welwitschia has survived for 1,000 years and continues to grow every day is a living testament to the amazing power of nature. And it all starts with simplicity, just 2 leaves, but carrying the enduring power of millennia of evolution. If the existence of Welwitschia has surprised scientists, it is the biological mechanism inside this plant that is truly an evolutionary masterpiece. In complete contrast to the normal growth law in plants where leaves grow in batches and branches grow alternately, Welwitschia stops producing new leaves immediately after germination. Those 2 unique leaves are never replaced and never stop growing. From the meristem at the base, similar to the fingernail area in humans, the base of the leaf will continuously produce new tissue, pushing the old leaves out over time. This is an uninterrupted growth mechanism, a form of eternal leaves, extremely rare in the plant world. What is even more strange is that Welwitschia leaves never die in the usual way. Instead of withering and falling off like other plants, they just get torn and frayed by time and weather. Sandwind herbivores, solar radiation, all work together to tear off individual leaves, turning them into long tangled tendrils like the tentacles of a beached sea creature. But at the base of the leaf, the growth tissue is constantly working, continuing to push out new growth, like a biological conveyor belt that never stops. In terms of size, the leaves of the plant can reach a maximum of about 4 meters long and nearly 8 meters wide, spreading across the ground like a biological carpet. the main stem of Welwitschia averages only 50 centimeters high but can reach over 1 meter in old individuals. Although it looks low and heavy, its woody structure is actually extremely solid, allowing it to withstand the scorching heat of the desert for hundreds of years without rotting. What is special about the leaf system is the way it forms a cover around the base, not only providing shade for the roots, but also preventing water evaporation from the soil, an extremely clever survival strategy in dry conditions. Even though they lie in the sun all day, Welwitschia leaves are still full of photosynthetic cells, synthesizing nutrients without needing to be renewed. This means that the plant saves a significant amount of energy in rebuilding its leaf structure, a big advantage when nutrients in the desert are extremely limited. In particular, the researchers discovered that the dividing tissue at the base of Welwitschia leaves contains a lot of heat shock proteins. These are proteins that protect cells from damage caused by high temperatures, as an innate defense mechanism against the scorching heat in the desert. This discovery was published in a study by Professor Wang at the Chinese Academy of Sciences in 2021, confirming that it is this special biological mechanism that helps Welwitschia leaves grow continuously without being permanently damaged in harsh environments. It's important to note that all of these strange traits are not abnormalities, but rather deliberate biological adaptations over tens of millions of years of evolution. Welwitschia doesn't need to renew its leaves, doesn't need to climb high to compete for light, doesn't need to grow at a rapid rate. It chooses to live slowly but steadily. And it's this persistence that has helped it survive through the ages, weathering cycles, extinctions, and changes that countless other plants have succumbed to. In the arid Namib Desert, where rain can go for years without coming, where temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius during the day and drop to near zero at night, the question is, how has the Welwitschia survived, even thrived for millennia? The answer lies not in luck, but in a biologically optimized survival system, the result of tens of millions of years of evolution to adapt to the harshest conditions on the planet. Previously, scientists believed that Welwitschia absorbed water mainly through its leaves and stomata, similar to some plants that live in foggy deserts. However, modern research, notably by Dr. John Henschel's team in 2018, has shown that the plant possesses a root system that reaches up to 1.4 meters deep, reaching underground water reservoirs scattered under the desert soil. When scientists used hydrogen and oxygen isotope analysis to determine the actual source of the water the tree was getting, they found that most of it was drawn from deep aquifers, not from fog as previously assumed. Fog is a supplementary element, not the main source of life. However, the mechanism by which Welwitschia harnesses fog is extremely sophisticated. Every morning when sea fog from the cold Benguela current sweeps inland, water droplets condense on the tree's broad, slightly concave leaves, then run down the leaves to the ground where they can be reabsorbed by the roots. This is a form of natural water recycling, minimizing the dependence on rain, which is virtually non-existent in the Namib region. In particular, the shape of the leaves spreading out around the base of the tree not only helps to retain moisture in the soil below, but also creates a small microclimate that limits evaporation, keeping the root zone from drying out in the desert sun. Not only water, Welwitschia also has to deal with extremely high solar radiation and extreme temperature fluctuations. In such conditions, most normal plant cells would be destroyed by heat-induced protein structure changes. But Welwitschia uses a special biological weapon, heat shock proteins, molecules that can stabilize and restore cell structure when exposed to environmental fluctuations. Thanks to the high density of these proteins in dividing tissues and leaf cells, Welwitschia can protect core life functions without being cooked, like most other plants living in the desert. Another important factor that helps Welwitschia survive is its super slow growth strategy. While many plants pursue growth rates to compete for light and resources, Welwitschia chooses the opposite path, slowing down the rate of life-saving energy, maintaining homeostasis and hiding in the ecosystem. With a leaf growth rate of only 13-18 centimeters per year, the plant can maintain its biological equilibrium for thousands of years without any extra energy supply. This slow-to-live-long strategy is not only optimal for the desert, but also a lesson for ecosystems affected by climate change today. All of these characteristics, from deep roots to groundwater dew-catching leaves, moisture-retaining covering morphology, to molecular mechanisms to resist heat shock, are not random. They are the result of a long process of natural selection in which only individuals with superior biological structures can survive, thrive, and pass on their genetic code to the next generation. Welwitschia has not only survived, it has overcome the harshness with the biological intelligence hidden in every cell, a living symbol of the super adaptability in nature. It would not be an exaggeration to call Welwitschia a prehistoric survivor. This strange plant species not only lives a long time in each individual, but its species itself has also existed for tens of millions of years, overcoming many mass extinctions on Earth. According to paleobotanical studies, Welwitschia first appeared in the early Cretaceous period about 120 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs still dominated the planet and flowering plants had just begun to appear. This makes Welwitschia one of the last ancient gymnosperms to survive to this day, like a living fossil in the hot desert. The ancient origin of this plant species once lay in a completely different ecosystem, the supercontinent Gondwana, where today's Africa and South America were still a single block. Fossil remains of ancient plants of the Welwitschia family have been found in northeastern South America, especially in Brazil. In a 2003 study, paleobotanist David Dilcher determined that the ancestors of Welwitschia were once widespread across the supercontinent, growing in a much more stable, moist environment than the Namib Desert today. However, when tectonic plates separated South America from Africa, the habitat of Welwitschia's ancestors was completely disrupted. The geological separation caused large-scale climate change. The once tropical forest area became dry, rainfall decreased, and air humidity plummeted. Plants that could not adapt quickly were gradually wiped out. Only a small group that could withstand drought, develop deep roots, live slowly, and tolerate heat well survived. And, of that group, Welwitschia mirabilis is the only species that survives today. From a biological taxonomic perspective, it is noteworthy that the entire genus Welwitschia has only one species, Welwitschia mirabilis. This is a rare phenomenon in the plant world, reflecting an extremely strict natural selection process. All the sub-branches of the ancestral species have become extinct, leaving only the main branch, the only one capable of adapting to extreme drought and environmental instability. Interestingly, this solitude in evolution has become a survival advantage for Welwitschia. Because it no longer competes with diverse species in the same ecosystem, this plant can grow stably in the less disturbed Namib Desert without having to fight for survival as fiercely as in the jungle or steppe environment. As a result, some populations in the southern desert, where there are fewer forest fires and a relatively stable climate, have grown larger, lived longer, and retained more primitive traits than populations in the northern steppe. All this evidence suggests that Welwitschia is not a temporary mutation, but the refined product of long-term continuous and fierce evolution. It has survived not only dinosaurs, but also ice ages, global climate change, and now human-induced climate change. The survival of such an ugly-looking creature is not a fluke, but the inevitable result of a sustainable, non-competitive, but extremely resilient and adaptive life strategy. It is no exaggeration to say that each individual Welwitschia alive today is a biological witness to an entire Earth history spanning hundreds of millions of years. A silent but powerful reminder of the power of slow and steady evolution in nature. In harsh conditions like the Namib Desert, life is not just about survival. It is about maintenance and regeneration. For the Welwitschia, a slow-growing, long-lived plant, The question is, how can they maintain their species in an environment with almost no rain-harsh temperatures and almost exhausted resources? The answer lies in a special, unexpected, but extremely effective reproductive strategy. First of all, it is important to know that Welwitschia is not a monoecious plant like most plants, but a species with separate male and female plants belonging to the group of gymnosperms rather than ordinary flowering plants. In each plant, reproductive structures grow from the woody stem near the base of the leaves, looking like small bristling branches. On male plants, these structures form male cones, which produce pollen. On female plants, they become female cones, which contain ovaries ready for pollination. Initially, scientists thought that Welwitschia reproduced like pine trees by the wind carrying pollen from male to female trees because the open desert environment is very conducive to pollen dispersal. However, a landmark discovery in 1999 by botanist Professor Ute Jurgens in southern Africa showed that Welwitschia pollination is not wind pollination, but insect pollination, a form of pollination known as entomophily. Research has shown that insects such as flies, beeswaxes, and even ants are attracted to the nectar secreted by the cones of male trees. Some insects come for the nectar, but many accidentally pick up pollen and move to female trees to continue feeding. And it is this movement that helps the pollen to be transported from male to female cones, allowing natural fertilization to occur in an environment where the wind is not always steady. In an interesting case of confusion, the Welwitschia bug, frequently seen in flower cones, was once mistakenly thought to be the main pollinator. However, later observations confirmed that the bug is primarily parasitic and feeds on plant nutrients and does not play a significant role in pollen transport. Instead, flies and wasps are the most effective mating agents for Welwitschia plants. After pollination is complete, the female plant begins to develop special seeds that have a thin, flat wing shape like a small fan. This allows the seeds to be carried by the wind over considerable distances, helping the plant to disperse its offspring far from the mother plant, avoiding competition for resources. When the seeds fall to the ground, they do not germinate immediately, but lie dormant waiting for ideal conditions, usually a rare rain event, to trigger the germination process. The strategy sounds simple, but it is actually quite sophisticated. It combines innovative seed morphology cooperation with pollinators and long-term dormancy, a mechanism that only long-lived species have developed. By spreading seeds on the wind and betting on rare moments of weather, Welwitschia does not need to reproduce quickly or in large numbers. Just a few seeds that find the ideal conditions and germinate successfully begin the next 1,000-year life cycle, quietly, slowly, but persistently, like the nature of the plant. From this, it can be seen that reproduction for Welwitschia is not just instinct, but a highly selective genetic strategy shaped by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. It is a clear demonstration that even in the most extreme environments, life finds a way. And sometimes it is quieter and more persistent than anything we could imagine. The Welwitschia is not just a morphological oddity or a living testament to evolution, but also a unique ecological link in the fragile natural system of the Namib Desert. In a land where life is almost completely extinguished by hot, sun-dry winds and poor soil, any living thing that survives must contribute to a microbalance, and the Welwitschia is the one that creates the ecological stability on the spot. One of the most important functions of this plant is to retain moisture in the surrounding environment. With its large, long leaves that spread out close to the ground, the Welwitschia creates a natural biological cover, shielding the soil below from direct sunlight. This minimizes evaporation while creating a microclimate that is more humid than the surrounding bare ground. The soil under the Welwitschia canopy therefore tends to retain moisture for longer, allowing microorganisms, insects, and other seeds to germinate in favorable conditions. Not only that, the long leaves that cover the ground also prevent sand from blowing, helping to keep the topsoil, which is highly erodible in desert conditions, from being carried away by the wind. This is a key factor in preserving the fragile biological structure of the Namib Desert, where a strong wind can strip away precious topsoil that takes centuries to form. Welwitschia also acts as a water and nutrient transit station for other organisms. By secreting nectar and retaining moisture in its leaf structure, it attracts insects, especially pollinators, facilitating cross-cultural interactions in this dry environment that is extremely lacking in diversity. The insects attracted to the plants not only pollinate the Welwitschia themselves, but also help transport pollen and nutrients between other points in the desert, expanding the ability of the plant to reproduce on a larger scale. At the local level, the presence of Welwitschia is also a biosignal for researchers and local people, because they only grow consistently in areas with stable groundwater or fog sources. Observing the location and growth status of the plants can help monitor climate change, desertification, and even the risk of groundwater depletion in the area. In other words, each individual Welwitschia is a living sensor of nature, clearly reflecting even the smallest changes in the Namib ecosystem. On the other hand, due to its limited distribution in a narrow area along the coast of Namibia and Angola, with uneven distribution density, the Welwitschia tree is also on the list of species vulnerable to human impacts and global climate change. Uncontrolled tourism exploitation, road infrastructure development, and groundwater level fluctuations can all directly affect the existence of this ancient tree species. Therefore, Welwitschia is not only a creature that needs to be studied, but also an object that needs urgent conservation because it represents a unique biological heritage on Earth. The Welwitchia's oddity doesn't end with its two leaves or its ability to live for thousands of years. What makes this plant such a complete biological icon is its slow, silent, and calculated cycle of regeneration, encoded right from its tiny seed. Not as loud as a blooming flower, not as intense as a tropical rainstorm, the Welwitchia's reproduction is a quiet symphony of waiting, selection, and timing. Once the successful pollination between a male and female plant is complete, usually by an intermediary insect such as a fly or a bee, the female plant begins to develop hundreds of seeds with a unique structure. Each seed bears a thin, flat wing shaped like a round or oval, resembling a mini umbrella. This structure is not simply decorative. It is an active dispersal mechanism that relies on wind power, allowing the seeds to travel far from the mother plant, avoiding direct competition for water and light resources. The most curious thing, however, is the germination strategy of these seeds. Unlike most other plants where the seeds fall to the ground and germinate as soon as they encounter enough moisture, Welwitschia chooses to stay put. The seeds can lie dormant in the sand for months, even years, waiting for a single trigger-heavy rain. And in the Namib Desert, where rainfall averages only 10-20 mm per year, rain heavy enough to trigger germination is a rare, unpredictable event. Therefore, each Welwitschia germination is not a regular season, but a biological gamble where only the seeds that meet the ideal moment can break through the dry sand. And of the hundreds of seeds that are dispersed, only a few individuals may survive and mature. But that is enough. Since each plant can live for hundreds to thousands of years, only a few successive individuals are enough to maintain the species. This is a clear manifestation of the reproductive strategy of few but sure, not fast but durable, completely opposite to short-term plants with continuous reproductive cycles. It is worth noting that Welwitschia seeds are also very vulnerable, both to environmental factors and other organisms. Insects can eat the young shoots, hot sand can burn the embryonic structure if germinated at the wrong time. Therefore, the patience of the seeds in waiting for the right environmental conditions is not only smart, but also a passive defense mechanism helping to avoid risks from adverse environments. This is a form of biological adaptation that does not require action but is still effective, showing the profound sophistication in the evolution of this plant species. Ecologically, the slow dispersal dormancy regeneration cycle of Welwitschia helps to stabilize population densities, avoiding biological explosions and collapses due to resource exhaustion. At the same time, it also plays a key role in maintaining diverse life in place, as new growth areas often become new focal points for insects, microorganisms, and other desert life forms to converge. In this way, each slow life cycle of Welwitschia becomes the fundamental pulse of a small, sustainable, and quiet ecological chain, not needing to make a fuss, but enough to sustain life in the driest place on the planet. In the natural world, survival is not only a feat, but also the harshest test of time. For the Welwitschia plant, life is not a series of explosive developments, but a quiet but resilient evolutionary journey. Over hundreds of millions of years, it is not the strongest or fastest species that survives, but the best adapted species. And Welwitschia, with its strange shape and lifestyle that defies biological laws, has become the most vivid symbol of nature's evolutionary principle. Unlike most modern plants, which grow quickly, reproduce continuously, and depend heavily on a stable environment, Welwitschia chooses its own path to live slowly, to live long, to live sustainably. It does not need to create thousands of generations each year. The plant only needs one generation that lasts for millennia. It does not need to migrate or occupy new ecosystems. It only needs a stable desert land where there are not too many competitors to quietly carry out its mission of survival. It is this living model that has helped Welwitschia survive many global climate changes, from the Cretaceous through the dinosaur extinction to ice ages and now man-made climate change. The genetic makeup of the plant proves one thing: adaptability lies not in complex diversity, but in extreme simplicity combined with high biological efficiency, optimized down to every cell. Welwitschia is not just an oddity, it is a living evolutionary ideology, a biological blueprint that has survived millions of years of reality testing, something that no human-made technology can compare to. Its existence is a powerful testament that in nature, consistency and simplicity may be the two most important factors in winning the battle against time. We are living in an age where nature is no longer immutable. Climate change, resource scarcity, mass extinction, global ecological problems are happening right before our eyes. In this context, the existence of a plant like Welwitschia is no longer just a biological curiosity, but also a silent but profound reminder of the limits and responsibilities of humans towards this planet. Welwitschia has lived for hundreds of millions of years without depleting any resources, without causing any ecological imbalance. It only takes enough and lives in accordance with what nature gives. Meanwhile, humans, who have only been around for tens of thousands of years, have created a consumption rate that far exceeds the Earth's ability to regenerate. Compared to the Welwitschia, humanity is living too fast, too much, and too far from the limits of sustainable ecology. From that perspective, the Welwitschia is a living lesson in the principle of balance. It is not because of its longevity that it succeeds, but because it knows how to wait, how to regulate, and how not to exceed the resilience of the environment. That is also what humanity needs to learn: not to live like a tree, but to exist sustainably on this very land without destroying itself. More importantly, the presence of Welwitschia in the desert ecosystem, a place that is considered lifeless and dead, proves that where there is life, there is hope, as long as we understand the right way to exist. The story of Welwitschia is not to glorify an ancient plant, but to warn modern humans that if we do not change the way we live, the way we exploit nature, things like Welwitschia will eventually disappear, taking with them irreplaceable ecological links. If you find Welwitschia's story thought-provoking, leave a comment and share your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more amazing natural discoveries.